While we typically try to keep our episodes light, today we will be discussing sensitive topics. Please be mindful of your own personal limitations and use your best judgment. You are welcome to skip ahead. Please do what is best for you. Welcome to the Therapist Uncut podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nik Young and Alyssa Najera.
All right, Therapist Uncut crew. Nik Young here with my fantastic and fabulous, as always, co-host Alyssa Najera. And we are incredibly honored, really, to be bringing you a very special episode on a special release date today, September 11th. And it is important to all of us here at Therapist Uncut that we both honor and thank all those who have served in our country in any capacity, but particularly during times of crisis and national crisis. We want to honor all those who are no longer here with us, all those that we've lost, all that are still here with us, living day to day with the memories of that day, living with the forever impact of that day. And we actually have a very special guest with us here today to help us do this and to help us pay tribute and honor to all those that I mentioned. And I am going to let Alyssa introduce him.
Well, first off, let me say welcome, David Lerma. We are very excited to have you on this podcast. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
David Lerma is a retired captain from San Jose Fire Department. David retired in 2009 after serving for 29 years. During this time, David received numerous certificates and commendations, including a Medal of Valor for his service at the World Trade Center attack. David is certified in high and low angle rope rescue, structure collapse and confined space rescue, and is a certified instructor for Rescue Systems 1 and Swift Water Rescue. David is also a longstanding member of Los Bomberos of Northern California, which is a nonprofit organization that strives to improve fire protection to communities throughout Santa Clara County and is committed to serving the community through volunteer opportunities, partnerships such as Toys for Tots, and scholarship and mentorship programs. David has proudly served his community as a member of Los Bomberos for over 40 years. Wow. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here, David. How are you feeling?
Feeling very good right now.
I got to say,
me feel proud.
Good. You should be. Yeah, you absolutely should be. And I just have to start off by saying we've never had a firefighter on our show. And I feel like it's a nice little time to share a brief 10-second story of I have so much respect for firefighters, and my family jokes because I've always said I would make an amazing firefighter if it weren't for the heat and the fire. Like all the other stuff, the rest, but I don't even like opening an oven to get cookies out of the oven because it's too hot. So if you took the fire out of firefighting, anyways, you're the coolest. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.
I would not. I would definitely not make it as a firefighter. I would freeze. So we appreciate your service of 29 years, and we appreciate the service of all of our first responders. So thank you. All right, David, let's get started by sharing with our listeners just a little bit about you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was born in Yuma, Arizona, lived there till I was 6 years old, and then we moved to San Jose, California. I've been here ever since, and I grew up in the east side of San Jose. I went to schools all in my neighborhood. I was raised here in east side San Jose. I was very, very fortunate to get hired in the fire department. I got hired as a certified bilingual, and because of my community, because they were seeking Spanish-speaking bicultural firefighters. So I got selected as a bilingual bicultural firefighter. And when I started working here in San Jose, I've always worked on the east side. At least 24 or 25 years out of my career, I worked here on the east side, station number 2 and station 16.
Awesome. What's that like working in your community, right? Because I know so many people that enter emergency services have to look outside of their community, but you were able to get in where you essentially grew up, where you live. What's it like just serving your own community every day?
Well, it's great because you know the area, you know the people, and you're here for the people that live in our community. And for me, you know, it was great to be able to help some of the people that we went to on calls, but sometimes, you know, the calls we went to, because you're in your community, you know a whole lot of people, and you get to see some of your friends and family in a bad situation. But the thing about it is that you were there to be able to help. And when they see someone that's from their community, it makes them feel a lot better. And then you're able to communicate with them, you know, and make them feel at ease.
Yeah, it's not just a stranger showing up on their worst day. It's
Right.
David from 3 streets over.
Right.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you grew up in San Jose. And for those of our listeners who don't live in California, I've heard Californians get the bad rap of assuming everyone knows where like the Bay Area is. But that's
Everyone lives on a beach.
Everyone lives on a beach.
Yeah.
We all live in Hollywood. But if you do not reside in California, San Jose is located in one of the more well-known areas of California in the Bay Area. So I just wanted to provide some of that clarification. In Northern California. It is Northern California, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
most people know that.
Silicon Valley Center.
There we go.
Yeah, most people know our area as either Silicon Valley or where the Sharks are from.
Oh yes, San Jose Sharks.
True. Okay, so speaking of San Jose, I'm going to kind of segue us in. I'm curious, and for those that don't know, how did a San Jose fire captain wind up responding at the World Trade Center?
During my tenure, we were working at the station I was at, and they turned that station into a USAR program, which is Urban Search and Rescue. And we specialize in special rescue techniques. And that's why I was certified in structural collapse, the high and low angle rope rescues, swift water rescue, and confined space. So we're kind of like the Green Berets of the fire department. And so I pretty much was lucky that at the spot where I was at, they turned that into the USAR program. So in the USAR program, I was on for about 10 years, and we get recertified every 2 years or every year, depending on the discipline. I became an instructor, and that's when they started setting up the FEMA search and rescue task force teams. So I got selected to be on Menlo Park, California Task Force 3. And we get deployed anywhere in the world, depending on what the need is. I had just gotten on the search and rescue team when 9/11 happened, and they had asked for some of us volunteers to go along. And well, you volunteer onto the team, and so I was deployed. We got there to 9/11 about a week after, so they had the nearest FEMA teams that responded first because they're the closest. And after 10 days on the scene, they get released, and then we go in and take over anything that they were doing as far as what the rescue procedures were at the time.
Okay. So I hope our listeners understand your special training. How specialized is that? What kind of percentage of the fire?
It sounds like a very elite team.
Yeah, exactly. But he's being humble about it. So
I can't tell.
I'm pulling that out a little bit here.
Out of, say we had 700 firefighters. Our department is 700 firefighters. And of the 700, we have approximately 30 to 40 people that are assigned to the USAR program. And we have 30 that are always on call, and we have 10 that are they substitute in when one of the regular USAR firefighters are, say, off duty on vacation. And so they come in and they fill in, but they're also trained. And of the 40 that we have USAR personnel, maybe 10 of our members are selected to go to the USAR FEMA team.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. And listening to David talk, everything is so logistical, because this has been David's life forever, right? Talking about all of these pieces. And I want to tap into the emotion a little bit. And I just want to preface our listeners with, be aware of how you're responding to this episode and what comes up for you. And if you need to pause and if you need to take care of yourself, please do that, because this is a very tragic event that we're talking about today. I want you and all of us and our listeners just to think about where you were that day. I think most of us can remember exactly what was happening, exactly what we were doing when we got that news. I mean, I was in high school. I remember walking through the hall and sitting down, and I had no idea what was happening. I heard what was happening, and it's playing across all the screens in class, but I didn't know what that meant. Well, do you remember what you were doing, Nick?
Yeah. To kind of tag off of what you said, I mean, I had an idea as to what was going on, right? But I remember watching the adults' reactions.
Yes.
And recognizing, oh shit. and then my own process after that.
So David, for you, what do you remember about that day?
Well, I had my alarm set because I was going to go to work that day. I was going to go be on duty. And I used to go in about an hour and a half early before my shift started because I would go work out. So my alarm went off at 6:30 in the morning, and it would be on the radio. So, the music would be playing instead of having a little beep or something go off. And that morning I was listening to this one radio station where, they have these guys that are playing practical jokes all the time. And so they started announcing that a plane had hit the Twin Towers. And I was, well, is this for real or is it a joke? I couldn't and they kept talking about it. And so I got ready, went to work because I worked 5 minutes away from my house. As soon as I got there, I turned the TV on and they showed the Twin Towers, and one of them was in flames. And maybe not 10 minutes later, that's when the second plane hit. And then I realized that this was real, and we were being attacked. So at the station, you have the other firefighters were still asleep because that night we have a three-piece engine or a station where we have an engine, which is, has the hoses in the water, and we have an aerial truck, which has a ladder and all our equipment. And then what we call a satellite unit was at the time our light tender. Our engine got deployed to one of the wildfires at that time, and they got called about 1 o'clock in the morning to immediate need. So they had to respond right away. So everybody pitched in and they loaded up the truck with all of our wildland firefighting equipment. And so the guys were pretty tired. They probably didn't go to sleep till like 4 or 5 in the morning. So I got on the vocal, throughout the whole station. And I said, like Nikki said, I said, the shit has hit the fan. And the guys were like, what the heck? Who's this guy? Who is this person? Right? So one guy comes in, he was, pretty angry because I woke him up. And then he looked at me, goes, what? And then I pointed to the TV and he looked and his jaw dropped. And after that, everybody started coming in and they figured out, what was going on.
And what's that like for you as, one, it hits you on a very personal level, but also professionally, what's that like for you being a first responder and experiencing this?
Well, we're watching on the news, and that day everybody wasn't allowed to go home, and the shift that was coming on, well, we're on duty, but then the shift that was going off, they didn't release them because we didn't know, how much or if we were going to have any events in our area. So they kept 2 shifts at every station, which was doubled our manpower. So everybody was coming in, and we're just watching the TV, see what was going on. And when the towers collapsed, our hearts sank because we knew we lost a lot of brothers.
Yeah.
That was tough.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, we saw what went on, and, we were there all day long pretty much. And then we got the call that we were going to be deployed. And the thing about it is, if we could have, every single one of us would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
But there was only a select few that were able to.
When did that call come, David?
It was later on in the evening when they said, to prepare yourself to like gather your equipment and stuff that you needed. And the very next day, we reported to Menlo Park Fire Department, is where our FEMA team has our headquarters in our warehouse. So we showed up at 8 o'clock, and at approximately maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, after we got everything, all our equipment together, and they actually did a DNA test on us just in case. And so then we boarded some buses and we got escorted by CHP, California Highway Patrol, to Travis Air Force Base, where we were there on standby for about another 3 or 4 hours. And then they flew us in one of the military cargo planes to New Jersey. It was McGuire Air Force Base. And we flew in there, and we were there standing by for maybe another 6 hours. And then they bused us to downtown New York, and our base of operations, where we set up all our equipment, everything, was the Javits Convention Center.
I'm taking a deep breath just listening to your recount. And I think I want to recap for our listeners. So here in the course of a few hours, essentially, you've woken up like any other day, which I know we all did. But then you went to work as a first responder in the Silicon Valley, on the west coast of the United States.
Yeah, completely other side of the country.
Yeah.
And then you realized what was happening, that this wasn't just a prank show on the morning radio talk show, right?
Yep.
And I can only imagine the additional layers, right? Because yes, you're a first responder. You know what's happening there, right? After that plane hit, what's going on a crisis response level. And so, yes, you know the civilians and how they're impacted, which is, I think, a lot of us were thinking about, but you also knew exactly what was going down from an emergency response level. And then you are watching like you said, your brothers impacted. When the towers went down, you knew what that meant. And then I would imagine that you are, Simon, you kind of hinted at this, you're simultaneously wondering, now that we know that this was an attack, you live in like we mentioned, the Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley is a prime target. So I'd imagine that, I mean, obviously they were gearing up for that, but you don't know if this is coming to your turf next. You don't know. And so I just, for those listening, just sit with that for a second. You have so many different emotions coursing through your body in that one moment and the hours after. And then fast forward, now you're across the country ready to serve.
And being on that civilian line, right, or being that high schooler, or working professional, or mom or parent that was at home, those are the moments where we put all of our everything into our first responders and into all of these professionals to keep us safe and to navigate the crisis. And if you watch our show, you can see the difference, I think, in mine and Nick's specialty. My specialty is not crisis. Nick's is. You want to know what I was doing while I was listening to David? I'm trying not to cry. And Nick is like totally, he was able to summarize it so well. And I don't have the capacity to do that because that's not my specialty, but being able to hear it directly from you, David, how different your experience was on that day or for those weeks and months to follow from so many of ours, it just really sheds light on how much you and our first responders do for us, especially in a time of crisis. And today's episode is really about honoring all of those who are lost, thanking and honoring all of those who served and who continue to serve.
And who are willing to put your life on the line every single day. I mean, you made a side comment, and I don't know that everybody knows what that meant, but why did they run your DNA before you got on that plane?
Oh, just in case something happened to you, and if there's like because they were expecting maybe a secondary attack, and so they didn't know where or how or what was going to happen, and so they would be able to identify you.
I mean, let that sink in. Most people have no idea what that's like, right? Most people will never know.
I appreciate you coming back to that, Nick. Thank you.
David, I mean, I just, I thank you for not just that day and the week after, but for every single day of your career.
You're very welcome.
Now, you said your team responded about 10 days after the attack, correct?
Yes.
What was that response like for you? And really, in summary, those several weeks or even months that followed, now that you're able to look back?
Well, initially when we were responding, it was a little bit scary. We didn't know what we were getting into, and we didn't know what to expect, what to see, because I've seen through my career some bad stuff. When I first got hired, I kept getting this recurring nightmare that I'd be driving down the freeway, and all of a sudden we'd run into a 10-car pileup, and I would be now that I'm a responder, first responder, brand new. I wasn't that confident as to how I would perform, and so I would get caught in the middle of all that chaos, and I would see, dismembered bodies, traumatized, people. And that was for about 2 or 3 years when I first started in my career. That was a recurring nightmare until I became more confident, in my skill level. And then it kind of just faded away. And so you get, kind of have that same vision of, when you get there, we didn't know what kind of atrocities we would see, like dismembered people, or just bits and pieces of people, because, 110-story buildings, those coming down, you never knew what to expect. And we were there. We finally got, deployed to ground zero. And, the New York firefighters that have been there for 2 weeks now, or you could tell they were, tired and weary and, but they kept going, they weren't going to stop looking for their brothers. And, like the civilians, we lost a lot of civilians there. And so, they were, working hard. They had to finally, force them to get off the pile, because then now they're a danger to themselves. Because we had some areas where, you'd be walking on a beam and, the hole below the beam there would be, 6, 7 stories, down. It was just pretty treacherous to be on that. And you never knew if, because the fire was still burning. That fire burned, I think, underneath that pile till like November, December, something like that, still smoke, coming up from underneath. So you never knew if there was going to be a shift, and, and you'd go down with the rest of the pile. We were doing shifts, our team was a team of 62. We divided into 31, and we were doing 12-hour shifts. We'd go back and forth. For us, just not knowing what we were going to get into.
Yeah. You talk about just the level of attention and skill that has to be present still when you're on a beam and underneath is a 6-story jar. I mean, right. And the emotions that you're having to compartmentalize. I don't want to say put aside, right? But compartmentalize. And then, obviously there's a reason they're working shifts, but that's assuming that when they pull you off, you're able to get some rest. So I'm curious, what was your experience? I could see a version of this where you get pulled off and you crash. I could see a version of this where guys and girls get pulled off and they couldn't sleep because of everything going on. I mean, I'm guessing you saw both.
Oh yeah, exactly. We, when we got deployed initially, like I said, we didn't know what we were getting into. So we get there. We really didn't get any sleep for, at least the first 48 hours. And then, once you get to that level of fatigue, then, I mean, wherever you drop, you could sit, you could just lay down on the ground and you'll fall asleep. And after, being there we were there for 19 days on that deployment. And, there was some people that just couldn't sleep at all. We have 2 doctors that are deployed with our team, and they're specifically there to take care of us. And so, some of the rescue personnel, they had to take, like sleeping pills to be able to sleep, because otherwise they couldn't. And also, when you're really fatigued, there's times when, you're so tired that you can't sleep. It's just, I don't know why that happens, but I'm sure we've all been there at least once or twice.
Absolutely.
Or more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you just think about the combined physiological and psychological toll of what you guys were doing every day.
So David, as you're sharing your experience with us from our clinical perspective and the mental health perspective. We've done several episodes on trauma and what trauma responses can look like.
Yeah.
And that's what I have like flashing all over. One, for the people who experienced it directly, for all the people who experienced this indirectly, for all the first responders, what kind of trauma this has brought to everybody. And I'm wondering what kept you and your team going, what supports were available to your teams immediately that helped you get through all of this.
Well, at the time when you're on duty and you're doing your job, this really doesn't even play into your mind because you're so focused on doing what you're doing. You're trying to find, trying to save somebody, right? And that's your main focus, is trying to save somebody, or even, trying to, make a recovery, because making a recovery, at least gives, their family closure. So whether, you save somebody or you recover, somebody, and that kind of a devastation, it's, you don't always make recoveries, and those people, their families and friends, they never have closure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you speak to closure, and there is research out there, right? But there's so much to be said for the traditions that we have in various cultures have different ways of honoring the end of life, right? But a large portion, at least in our culture and society, is that visualization and that knowledge. And I can only imagine all the families that still to this day, haven't and won't have that degree of closure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And David, you said when you're doing this job, that's not even a thought because you're doing your job. I wonder what it's like when you are off the clock and you have time to let these things settle in. What kind of supports were available to you guys back then to ensure your mental wellness?
Well, initially when I first got hired, it was like you had to man up, which meant that, if you, let it get to you, then you shouldn't be a firefighter. You can't handle it. You can't handle the stress, for like the first 10 years, that wasn't even a concern. As time went on and, our policies and procedures, they started to evolve, because in the fire service, it's very, very traditional. At the beginning, you had your breathing apparatus stuff. And if you had wore a breathing apparatus, during that time, then you were pretty much a sissy, didn't need to have, protection. Now we're seeing what the end result of that was, we're losing a lot of our retired firefighters to cancer. Mm-hmm. And so, as time went on, we understood that if we're going to have a quality of life after we retire, we need to start taking care of ourselves. And so then they came up with a debriefing where, they would have even our own peers, at the time, the way you resolve that, if you had any kind of problems that, you're within your own crew, you would kind of help each other out. And as time evolved, then they, started getting counselors that would come in. And we had some of our own peers that were like debriefing counselors also. And if we had a pretty bad incident, then right after the incident, right then and there, we'd get a debriefing. So then, it evolved, and it, now we have, counseling anytime anybody ever needs it. If you're an active firefighter now, now that I'm retired, I'm realizing that, we've had a lot of people that had a PSTD, and, you never saw it on anybody. Like I said, you couldn't show any weakness. And, we've had over, I would say the last 4 or 5 years that I've known, some of my good friends that have committed suicide because, they were having issues. And, not only with the fire department, but maybe like they had issues within their relationships or, family. and or they had to deal with pain. We get like physical injuries, and sometimes you just can't get rid of the pain. And some people that I knew very well, they work with, and that's they just couldn't handle the pain anymore, and they weren't getting better, and so they committed suicide.
And David, I mean, you just rattled off a list of factors that are just your reality.
Mm-hmm.
But I want everybody to stop and listen to that list. And that's a partial list, right, of all of the factors that make our first responders, firefighters particularly, susceptible to PTSD, suicide. And it's just something that we need to pay attention to. And they deserve our attention. And David, I'm curious, you mentioned over the course of your career seeing a shift. You mentioned peer support. You mentioned professional counselors coming in. And then you also mentioned peers that were getting some additional training in debriefing. I'm curious as to your experience. Did you see a difference in the benefit between peer and professional? Did you see that the two of them complemented each other? Did you see your brothers and sisters more likely to seek one versus the other? And that could change over time. What was your experience with the different versions of support?
Well, for me personally, they complemented each other very much.
Cool. And I was hoping that was going to be an experience, right? Because there's... I'm coming at it from the crisis mental health side, is there's so much to be said for that peer support, right? I mean, your brothers and sisters understood what you just went through far more than Joe Schmo across the street, right? And just like if we take this type of scenario off the table, just therapy, right? A lot of just day-to-day life stuff can be effectively addressed by reaching out to your support system, whether that be your family, your friends. But then there are times when we would benefit from that additional education and training, right? That's when you wind up in Alyssa's office.
And what's tough is you really, some things you just can't take home. So, you really can't get family and friend support because, some things you just can't take home.
And when you say that, are we talking because A, they're not going to understand, B, you're going to hurt them, and you don't want to put that weight on somebody that doesn't do what you do on the daily? Combination?
Yes. Yeah. All of the above.
That's one of the major challenges with our first responders or professionals who are working with traumatized populations are the barriers of confidentiality or not wanting to be a burden on your family or friends. So it can feel very isolating when you have these experiences. So when you have things like peer support, a strong supervisory relationship, or in your case, a team relationship with all of your crew, or when you have those professional resources available to you, it really does help reduce the risk of these trauma responses or these secondary traumatic responses. And I lit up when you talked through the evolution of what the perspective around mental health and mental wellness is in this profession, and actually how important it is to do these preventative things, not just to protect your physical health, but your mental health as well, because it tells us that we're in a very good direction of one, acknowledging and understanding the level of trauma that our first responders are being exposed to, and responding to it in a way that's going to help prevent those things, or again, reduce the risk. And for you being 29 years, you have seen so much evolution and so many things change. And I know we've said this again, but thank you again for sharing all that, because it's just a wealth of knowledge for all of us.
Absolutely. With your 29-year career, is there anything that you would like for the general public to know about your job and just what it's like day in, day out, the wear and tear, physically, mentally, anything that you would want to say to the public?
A lot of people don't understand that we don't just go fight fires. We have a lot of different directions that a firefighter can go. We're number one, which is probably the majority of our calls. I would say from 85 to 90% of our calls are medical calls. When we go, anything from childbirth to suicide. everything else in between, like drug addiction, overdoses, shootings and stabbings, vehicle accidents, all different types of traumas, the sports injuries. It's just so many things that we are exposed to. And then there's the hazmat, hazardous materials. Whenever there's say a hazmat spill or a leak of some sort, then, we're usually the first responders. So, we get there and we have to figure out exactly what we're working with. And then from there, we, kind of isolate the area or, have, people vacate the area depending on what we have. And so we have to analyze everything right away to figure out what's going on. We also, do like fire inspections, try to keep the community safe. Prevention, fire prevention, trying to keep, incidents from happening. And, it could be any little thing. And so, we just go in a lot of different directions. We have like the USAR program. We have our airport crash and rescue rigs out at the airport. We have specializations in a bunch of different categories where we have to get certified. And
the airport unit is the one that I don't want to know anything about because my plane, I don't even want to think about my plane going down.
Yeah, no, and neither do we, right? That's one of, the biggest fear too is, mass casualties, right? When, a big plane goes down, then, now you're really going to have to, put, your mental capacity, in effect because same thing, if you see mass casualty, it's a lot of pressure on you because now you have to be selective as who you're going to try to help and who you can't help,
Mm-hmm.
And, so it's just, I just want, our citizens that really don't know what firefighters do to understand that, that we are under a lot of pressure. And, sometimes, we're not perfect. We do make mistakes. And, we try to be perfect as best we can because our lives and their lives depend on it, in a lot of situations. But there's minor things that we do that, people will go off on us, and it's not a whole lot of people, but, there's sometimes when people say, we go to the Starbucks and have a coffee, or we go, down to sometimes we've been in grocery stores buying our food and, there's sometimes that, things get politicized where, they're voting on the fire department, for maybe a raise or one thing or the other. And, at the time, they're against, the whatever political things going on, we're buying our food and they're, so I'm paying for all that, no, you're not, I'm paying for it, but they don't understand that. Right. Mm-hmm. And they, why aren't you stationed? Why are you here? Well, we got to eat, mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just, like some people just, go off on you and not everybody, there's so many people that love us that we're so grateful and appreciative, they'll bring, cookies and cakes, they'll bring, a basket of fruit, they come by the station, and that kind of offsets the negative part, mm-hmm. And, a lot of people, they don't understand too, mentally and physically, there's a lot of people that retire and they're broken. Their bodies are completely destroyed. They get, caught up in a situation during a fire or a vehicle accident, just maybe even carrying a patient, moving them from, the bed to the gurney, mm-hmm. You tweak your back or, you twist a knee or, a shoulder, you're never in a stable situation. If you're on a roof, you're walking on beams, on top of roofs, you're sometimes way up high. And, we have falls, we have slips, sometimes floors burn through, we go through them, and that's when you start getting hurt. Some people really don't recover. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem that, physically, they may only last 5 years after they retire. Mentally, like I've already talked about what goes on with that. So I just want them to understand that, we don't all come out of it. I was very fortunate in my career that I came out pretty sane and pretty healthy,
mm-hmm.
But I just want them to understand that, we're human beings too. Mm-hmm. They think sometimes we're Superman and so we do also sometimes. And that's what
it's hard not to see you as our superheroes, right? Well, I do have one question for you, David. There's a lot of things that we talked about today that were hard for lack of a better term. We talked about a lot of the risks that come with your position. And I'm wondering, I do want to wrap it back to what we started with, which is this is a special release to honor all of those who served and were lost as a result of the attack on 9/11.
And those that continue to live with it every day.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder now that you're able to look back, I guess this is a two-part question, so I'm going to ask you the first part first. What did you notice about the unity among our nation, or about the sense of community that followed after September?
And I'm going to pause here and get on a little bit of a soapbox, because I think that personally, I would have two missions with this episode. And one is to honor our first responders, David in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And two, to emphasize unity, because we are, I think, at a time in our nation right now where everything feels so polarized, and it's like we've forgotten. Time goes by, people forget. All they see is what they want to see or what's right in front of them. We don't open our minds to differences. So now I'm going to go back to Alyssa's question. Is just please listen to his response, guys. Like, what did you notice did you see unity? What did that look like?
Well, we finally, deployed to go to the ground zero. We were in buses, and it had on the sides there that, we were FEMA rescuers. And, right before, they had probably like about 20 blocks of New York just fenced off where nobody could go in. One of the entryways when we were going in as a team, we had 500 people that were standing there at the entry, cheering us on. It just, it kind of didn't feel right because we hadn't done anything yet, but it felt great that they knew we were there to help. After that, even when we came home, you couldn't do nothing wrong. Everybody loved us. And you could see, everybody was united. And it didn't matter, where you came from, who you were, whether, you were poor or rich. We were very united at that time. And that was such a great feeling, that we were a country, we were a nation under one flag, And I was asked this at the 20-year reunion. We had a mass, and then from the mass we marched maybe 150 of our firefighters in Class A's marched to our fire station 1, where we have our fallen firefighter bell. The people, were walking, they were cheering us on. But I got asked by a reporter that same question. And that's what I said. They go, well, what would you want, like right now that was back then? I said, our country to be united. Well, like you said, we're falling way apart. There's just too many differences now. And for us to be united as a country again would make me so proud and feel so good,
Yeah. And, obviously it wasn't all unity that came out of that. I know there was, I want to make sure that I leave space for the judgments that did occur for certain individuals, but did it matter when you were there searching? Did it matter the color of somebody's skin? Of who you were saving? Did it matter their age?
That's never, ever been an issue for any of us. In the fire service, and you don't see color. Everybody bleeds red, and we try to save as many lives as we can. And it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter where they come from. And, it's not something that we look at, we don't tell no difference.
And Nick, I want to thank you for mentioning that, because it's important to acknowledge and not negate those negative experiences that resulted as well. And so thank you for saying that. And
because there was this grand, large scale sense of unity, right? But there was also a significant spike in prejudice towards certain individuals based on race and such. So how do we learn, right? That's what I'm huge on. We're always going to make mistakes as humans, as a community, as a country, as a world. But how do we learn, and how do we do it different going forward? And I think that's what I want everybody to just stop in their day. That doesn't mean we're the same. Doesn't mean we have to be the same, right? We can be different. But, our kiddo just had a ceremony at school in preparation for graduation. And we're standing there saying the pledge. And there was just a subset of people that just all caught each other's eye and were like, liberty and justice for all. And we've lost that as a country. It's liberty and justice for some. And so how do we bring that back? How do we get there? How do we get there? And how do we take stories like David's?
I would say that, you know what? You can't judge a person if you don't know them. There's been people, that I've talked to, that I would have never known their story. I never would have known that, what their problems are, what their issues are, or, when you talk to somebody, for a little bit, just getting to know them makes you forget, you won't judge, people are way judgmental before they even get to know a person. And in that sense, I think if you think a person's bad, talk to them. If you think a person's doing wrong or shouldn't be here, well, talk to them and find out what their story is. And then you can make a judgment,
I like it.
I appreciate that. Be genuinely curious.
Yes.
Curiosity.
Talk to people. Yeah, talk to people,
Absolutely.
David, earlier I said I have a two. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you go ahead. No, I'll let you finish. It might be the same thing.
Earlier I said I have a two-part question that really wasn't related. Here's my second question. We talked a lot about the risks and the hard things that come with being a first responder and responding to crisis. But you did this job for 29 years. So clearly it's something that I'm going to guess, are very proud of. And I'm wondering, what value has this career brought to you?
For me and my family, it's made us very proud. For me to come from the background that I came from and to be able to have this type of career, it was just, I would not change one thing ever, that as far as being a firefighter, it's such a proud career. And the reason I got hired is because my father came home one day and he would always find, jobs for our uncles, his brother-in-laws, whoever, he would always, be checking the want ads. And he came home and he goes, "Hey, David," he goes, "would you be interested in being a firefighter?" And at the time I was 19 years old. And I said, "Yeah, that be pretty cool." And he says, "Well, they're going to be hiring bilingual firefighters for the city of San Jose, and they're giving some prep classes through the Bomberos organization." And that's how I got into the Bomberos organization. And so I took a couple of their classes, and I was, like I said, I was very, very fortunate, very lucky to have been hired. I took the test, my first and only test, and in my city where I wanted to be a firefighter. There's firefighters that are, that have tested 30, 40 times, and have gone to 10 different cities across the country to test, to be firefighters. And I was very, very fortunate. So for me, I think that I was ordained or, just destined to be a firefighter. And I was always very proud. And I love helping people, whether it be in an emergency situation or just to help them with directions, or if they have some kind of a minor problem, that needs to be resolved, or somebody to talk to, I'd be the first one to step up. And so in that sense, it was just such a rewarding career, so much so that my son is now he's following in my footsteps.
So, all right. Very cool. That's awesome to hear.
It's beautiful.
The one thing I did want to say is that at 9/11, we lost, 3,000 civilians, and we lost 343 FDNY firefighters. But, that's not the only loss that we have. There's still, numerous civilians and numerous firefighters. We've lost over, I'm just guessing at this, but, I can for sure say that at least over 2,000, more people due to the exposures that they had. They didn't die immediately, but to this day, they're still dying. They had, there's a lot of complications that they had from breathing in all the dust, when the dust cloud came down. There was injuries, they were able to walk away or actually get away from the scene. But, just with all the exposures and everything, and a lot of cancers, a lot of issues, and that's right now, there's a federal organization that is testing us. We get a physical every year to see where we stand physically and mentally. And, I just wanted to, say, hey, we will never forget.
And I think that's where we end it. We will never forget. And David, I just want to say thank you, not just for your service that day and the weeks following and still to this day, but for every day. And not just every day that you showed up and clocked in, right? But every day now. And I know you're retired, but you're speaking to the continued effects of the job, right? Every year you got to go get in that physical and see how your health is. And so this is something that, we will thank you for every day, even after retirement, every day of your life. So, we appreciate you.
Thank you again, David, for being on the podcast and sharing your story and being vulnerable enough to share all of those details of your experience and helping our listeners really understand what that experience is like for you. And hopefully, when he told the story about arriving on the bus and there was all these people and it was a little conflicting because you're like, we haven't done anything yet. You were there to help, and B, you and all of our first responders represent hope. And that's what you were bringing that day, as well as help and hope for the rest of us. So thank you again, David. And as always, thank you to our listeners for allowing us into your lives and helping us make mental health relatable and a part of your everyday conversation. For show notes on this episode, please visit therapistuncut.com and visit our socials that we are currently not very active on.
As Alyssa and I announced previously, ain't nobody got time for that social media stuff.
Until next time, thanks, guys.
And thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.